Hello and welcome everybody. In this video, I'm planning to show you new functionality that was added to Credit and Collections module in Dynamics 365 for Finance. Specifically, that functionality allows you to automatically calculate credit limits for the customers based on the rules that you define in the system. This functionality became available in 2020 release wave 1 of the application. The first thing you will need to do in order to test that functionality is to enable that feature. For that purpose, you will have to navigate to Feature Management Workspace. Once you're inside, I will go to All and we'll search for the word credit. You will see that the credit management allows you to create and manage credit limits, block customer orders based on the rules, and release those orders. This functionality or this feature has been added to our demo system a couple of days ago, and it was enabled on March 24th as well. So we're good to go here. In order for you to test, we will navigate to modules, select credit and collections, and on top of all the familiar setups and menu items that already existed here, we start seeing items that are specific to the new functionality. Right here we see the risks, right here we see credit management setup, and we also see credit and collections parameters. And this is where we'll go next. Once you're in here, I will navigate to Credit tab here. I will go to the credit limits, and I will make sure that the Allow Manual Editing of Credit Limits is turned off. What that means is that user will not be able to edit credit limits directly on the customer's form. Instead, they would have to go through the credit limit adjustments form, which we will discuss later in this video. There are other setups related to how orders are going on hold. They're right here, and I'm planning to cover those in a separate video that hopefully will be released right after this one. Now let's talk about defining the rules that will govern how these credit limits are automatically calculated for our customers. The first thing we'll need to define is the ranking. So once you're in the credit and collection module, go under Setup, Credit Management, select Risk, and go to Risk Classification. Under here, you see that I have defined 3 classifications or 3 ranks. I have a low rank, which basically gets you from 0 points to 35 points. Then I have a medium rank, that goes from 36 to 60. And then I have a high rank from 61 to 100. So I have those 3 buckets, and each of my customers will fall in one of those buckets based on the number of points or ranking points that they will get accumulated. So this is just the buckets. There are no rules in accumulating those points yet. The next thing we'll need to define will be the scoring groups. Under here, I have defined 2 scoring groups. The first one is called Account, and that feeds from the account status, which is a brand new field on the customer master that you can assign a single status to a customer. And based on the status assigned to a customer, I can add certain number of points to that customer when it comes to credit limit ranking. And as you can see here that I have a status that is blocked, which is again all user defined statuses, and the scores or the number of points that will get you is 0. Then for my small accounts, I have 10 points defined. For my medium ones, 30, and for my large customer accounts are 50 points. So again, based on the account status that was selected for each customer, each of those customers will get a certain number of points, either 0, 10, 30, or 50 in those cases. And another scoring group is growth. You can see here that it doesn't really type to any group type, and that was purely user defined. What that means is it doesn't look at the fields on the customer master to determine the status or another group. It actually looks into a ranking area, which I will show you next, and then decides how many points should be accounted for each customer based on the growth index. So I have defined a growth index, which is user-defined ranking. And from there on, I'm saying if the growth index is from 0 to 30, which means companies that are not growing so rapidly, I will get them 10 points when it counts towards their credit limit. For the companies that are semi-growing, which are between 35 and 70 growing index points, they will get 30 points in the ranking. And then for the high pace growing companies that are from 71 to 100 index points, they will get 50 ranking points for their credit limit calculations. So once we have defined those two scoring groups, the next question that you may ask would be, how do you assign values for each customer based on those two scoring groups? For that purpose, we will navigate and we will open our customer table. And in here, I will randomly select a customer here and navigate to a new tab on the top called Credit Management. And in here, I will click on Risk Score. What I will see here is that I see my two scoring groups account, again, that account status that goes from small, medium to large and blocked. And then I see my growth index. But in the second column, you see there are no values here. What that means is that specific customer doesn't have any values for those two scoring groups, and therefore the total number of ranking points would be 0 in this case. So what do you need to do in order for it to calculate these ranking points? So the first thing is, of course, you need to have to make sure that my account status is defined for this customer. So I'm going to open the customer details form for this specific customer. We'll switch to edit mode. Scroll down to my credit and collections area in here. And you see there are many more new fields that have been added. But what I'm most interested in is the account status. And if I click on that drop down right here, you see the 4 account statuses that I have defined. If you're interested, we can go into the main table for those just to see those are user defined. Those were defined by me. And I have actually assigned a blocked account status as a block, which means it's blocked for all invoicing and delivery. So you can just simply change the account status, and that will in turn apply a hold to a customer account. All other ones, large, medium, and small, you see that the blocking was switched to no. That means it doesn't matter which one of those 3 you select, there will be no blocking on this customer account. So let's go back to our customer card here. And what I will do here is I will select, for example, an account status as large. If I go back to my risk score here though, you see that the value is still blank. I can manually select it, but that's not really ideal, right? What I want to have is just define a field on my customer master, which is, this is a customer account status large. And then I expect the system to pick up and reflect this change in my ranking scoring. So in order for me to see this ranking scoring to be updated, I have to run a separate periodic job. So I'm in my credit and collections module again. I will navigate to periodic tasks, go to credit management. And here you see a new job that is called update risk scores. So what that job does, again, you can set it up as a periodic job, is looking at all the inputs based on your scoring groups and then calculates a score rank for each of the customers. So I'm going to run this job. This job runs pretty quickly. And once I do that, let's go back to that customer number 24. And now let's just check if the ranking has been updated. So I'm going to select that yellow square. That's a customer that we looked at before. And now I'm going to click on risk score. And now we see that the value here has been updated. So now it's truly reflecting that my account status is large. And then I see the risk contribution gives me 50 points. What that means is a large customer based on our scoring groups. If you remember, the large accounts get 50 points towards their credit limit calculations. The growths, though, cannot be really controlled by any field on the customer record. Why? Because this is a user-defined scoring group. So in order for me to be able to enter a value, I have to do it directly right here. And if you remember, we have that growth index going from 0 to 100. And let's say in this case, it will be 35. So as soon as you tap in the value 35, if you tab out from that field, you see that the number of points has been changed to 30. If you, for example, increase it to 80, I think, you will see that the risk number of points has jumped to 50. And I think somewhere in between, I think it's 45 or so, we have a number of points that is set to 30. Right? So the user-defined ranking has to be entered manually in this risk ranking form. For all other ones, you just have to update the field or the date on the customer master, and that would in turn reflect on the ranking system after you run that periodic job. One thing I wanted to mention, if we go back to our scoring groups and click on U, I just wanted to show you the different inputs that the system can track when it comes to calculating that rank. You can see that it looks at the account status, which we already used. You can also look at the default country address. You can also look at the new field that is called credit management group, which is basically a user-defined list of groups that you can assign to individual customer, but it also looks at the customer since. So there's a new field in the customer master that allows you to specify the date from which that customer became a customer, and you can use this in calculating the ranking. It also you can use average payment days, DSO, average balance, etc., etc. So there are different inputs that the system can account for when it comes to calculating that rank. All right, so now let me go back to my customers here and show you what I have done for 3 customers that I will use for this demonstration. So the first one is the customer number 21, which is auto wholesale. And if we look at this account number right here, we see that the account status is medium. And then if we go to our risk score, we see that the growth index was set to 80. And in total, we have 30 points that are coming from the account status and 50 points that are coming from the growth index, right? So what the system does, it looks at both scoring groups, at all scoring groups that you have defined, and sums them up. So in this case, we have 30 plus 50, so we have 80 ranking points that were accumulated for the customer US 021. Then we're going to look at another customer here, which is number 22. We will see that account status is small. And if we go to the risk score, we see that it's 55. So we have 10 points calculated for the small account, and then 30 points calculated for the growth index value of 55. So in total, we have 40 points calculated for this account. And then for the last customer that we will use for this demonstration, number 23, what I have done is I have specified the account status. You will see it's medium, but I intentionally left the growth index blank. I did not enter it manually. So in this case, you see that the medium gives me 30 points, but because the growth index was left as blank, the value or number of points calculated for the growth was actually 0. So this is the lowest ranking customer just because he has only 30 points coming from the account status and 0 from growth. All right, so we have first customer, 80 points in total. The second customer, 45 points in total. And the third customer, 30 points in total. And just to refresh your memory, if we go back to the first setup that we looked at was this risk groups, risk classifications, we see that for customers that are from 0 to 30, which would be our last customer, that will fall into the low ranking group. For the customers that are between 36 and 60, which would be that second customer, they will fall into that medium ranking group. And for the first customer, US 0 to 1, the one that has 80 points in total, it would fall into our high ranking group. Now, let's put it all together and see how we can actually define the credit limits based on the rank group that each customer falls in. And that will be the last piece of the configuration that we have to review before we will move on to the calculations. So we will go under Risk, Automatic Credit Limits menu item. So in here, I have defined 3 groups. Every time you click on you'll see that risk group is a mandatory field. So if I have to define credit limits for the customers that fall into 3 different risk groups, I have to create 3 different records right on here. So let's review the low one. In low one, I'm saying that if the customer falls into the low group, which will be the third customer 0 to 23, we have these 3 records that will define what credit limit he will get. And you can see here that it's not really driven by the total number of points. It's actually looking at the specific scoring group. In this case, I'm saying it's an account, and then defines the credit limits based on the value of the account status. So if the account status is large and the customer falls into the low risk group, then this customer is going to get a credit limit 30,000 calculated. If the customer account is medium and this customer falls into the low risk group, then he will get calculated 20,000 credit limit. And then for the account number that is small and it falls in that low risk, low ranking group, then they're only going to get 10,000 suggested by the system, right? So that will be the case for our third customer, because that third customer was actually going to fall into the low risk group based on the total number of points, but because the account status for that customer would be medium, that's a value that we expect the system to suggest to us. The second customer, if you remember, was actually using, the second customer had a growth index of 55, which translated to 50 points, and the account value was small, which translated to 10 points. So in total, we have 30 plus 10, it resulted in 40, and that's why the second customer will fall into that medium ranking group. But what will define his credit limit is not the total number of points, but rather a specific value, in this case, of the growth index. So what I'm saying in here is that if the growth index for that customer is greater or equal to 90, and this customer belongs to that medium group, then these guys will get 75,000 suggested to them. If the growth index is greater than or equal to 30 points, then they will get 45,000 suggested, and then the lowest one from 10 or greater, that will be only 25. And if you remember, I said that the second customer, his growth index was actually 55, right? So what that means, they're not quite here yet. That means they're only 55, so they do not really qualify for the 75,000 credit limit, but their growth index is 55, so that means they qualify for 45,000 suggested credit limit. And the second or the last group that I have defined here when it comes to calculating our automatic credit limits is the high one, right? The last one. But what I wanted to make here is I wanted to complicate things on purpose, just because there are two parts to these calculations. The first one, the system looks at the total number of points each customer has and then decides on the risk group, right? So in our case, that first customer has 80 points in total, and therefore that customer qualifies to that high ranking group. But then in order to decide the credit limit, there is a second part that looks at the specific value of the specific scoring group. But you can see here, I have combined two scoring groups. I have combined growth index and I have combined the account status, and I mix them all together in here. And I will show you the results of the sequencing of these records in this form right now. Now, let's go into demonstration. I will now go into my credit limit and adjustments. So that's a form that I can use to modify the current credit limit. Remember, I have disabled manual editing of the credit limit on the customer form, so I cannot do it on the form itself anymore. I have to go through this posting journal. One thing that I will say, if you have any issues creating a new journal, if you're getting an error, you have to define a number sequence for the journal numbering, I think. So because I already fixed that issue right here, I'm going to create a new journal header. I will stick to the credit limit. I will not use the temporary credit limit, which I will discuss in my next video. And then I will click on lines. And then I have my blank journal. I will click on generate, and I will navigate to automatic credit limits. In this case, the form saying, all right, so for which customers would you like to calculate new suggested credit limit? If you click on the records to include, you see that I basically kept the filter wide open. The only thing that I'm saying is the customer has to have unlimited credit limit set to no. That means that it's a limited credit limit that the customer should have. And I also had to define the expiration date of my new credit limit. And let's say I'm going to move it to end of May 2020. And then I'm going to run my job. So we will see a number of records calculated, and then we're going to review the new credit limit column right here. So if we scroll into our customers right here. So I think here are the three customers that we discussed, 23, 22, and 21. So let's take a look at the first at this record right here. So we have a credit limit calculated as 20,000. So let's just kind of go deeper into why the system suggested as 20,000. All right. So remember, this customer fell into our low ranking risk group based on the total number of points. That customer only got 30 points, and that's why he's in low group. So we have to look at the low group right here. And then we have to look at the account size. This customer was actually marked as the medium account based on its status. And that's why we have 20,000 suggested right here. If we look at it right here, we see the new credit limit suggested by the system is 20,000. Great, so we kind of figured out the logic right here. Let's take a look at that second customer. That second customer was qualified as a medium based on its ranking, based on the total number of points, right? So we have to look at the medium right here. But remember, this customer had a growth index of 55. So it's not 75,000 because it only starts from 90 points and up, but it's actually this record right here, 30 points and up. And that's why we have the new credit limit suggested as 45,000. Let's go back here and let's check a look. Yes, it is 45,000. Now let's take a look at that last customer, and we see that the system have suggested as 50,000 as the credit limit. So let's go and remember that customer was the high ranking group. So we have to open it right here. So we're basically saying that, all right, so the growth for that customer was set to 80, right? So this does not qualify. We're going to start from the top and going to go down. This record, the first record, doesn't qualify. Why? Because it's only for the customers that have a growth index 90 or above. In this case, customer is not there. He's only at 80. So we look at the second record, and the growth index is actually saying 30 or above. And that's the case for that specific customer. And that's why the system suggested as 50,000 as the brand new credit limit. But what I wanted to illustrate here is how important the sequencing of these records in this form, because all it's looking at is from the top bottom, and as soon as it finds the match, either based on the growth or based on the account, it doesn't matter which scoring group there is, as soon as it finds the match on any scoring group, that's the limit that it will suggest. So what I will do here, I will go into the edit, and what I will illustrate is I will move this account, I will move it up, 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 up. I'm putting it in between the growth 90 and above and the growth 30 and above. I'm putting it right in between. When I change that, again, I'm expecting the system go from the top bottom. I'm expecting it to go and start qualifying each of those records from top to bottom. So let's take a look how it works. So I will save these changes. I will generate a new automatic credit limit suggestions. I will make sure that delete existing lines are set to yes, so it's going to regenerate the lines for me. And now I'm thinking, all right, so it's going to go from the top, it's going to look at the first record, is growth index 90 or above? And the answer would be no. All right, so it's going to skip it and it's going to move on to the next record. And the next record in our case will be, is the account status medium? And in this case, for this customer, yes, it was set as the medium account status. So it's going to say, okay, here's a match. I found the match based on the account. And here's a new suggested limit, 275,000. And if we check it right here, now the newly suggested credit limit for this customer based on the new sequence that we have just defined will be 275,000. And then in order for you to activate these new limits, all you have to do is just click on post, and that will result in the update of our credit limits for all the customers for which we have included in our journal. So that was my demonstration of the new functionality that automatically calculates and suggests new credit limits based on the customer ranking. I hope you found it useful. And in the second part of the credit and collections review, I will be talking about order holds and how we can define the rules that govern these holds. Until the next time, take care.